Hello, my brood. A lot of us neurodivergent people are assigned the label quirky at some point in our lives. And one of the reasons might be because we do things in an odd way or possibly a particular order that people don't really understand. Let's talk a little bit about that today, but first, let's briefly discuss a couple things called expected utility and subjective utility. And as always, I'm not a mental or physical health professional, I'm not a doctor, and I'm not a financial advisor. That warning may seem a little out of the blue, but it will make sense in a moment. Behavioral psychologists, marketers, business analysts, salespeople, and many professions and professionals tend to think in some terms of expected utility. Expected utility is what one can reasonably expect out of an event or out of some transaction or agreement when calculated by some average. For a highly simplified example, and the one that often gets used when teaching about expected utility or any decision making, is a casino may set an expected value where for every 20 cents a gambler gains, they lose 80 cents. I'm sure that most of us have considered that a casino wouldn't really make much business if for every 20 cents the gambler gained, the casino only gained 10 cents. That wouldn't be a very practical business for them. So, expected utility is often referenced in economic terms, but it's not exclusive to financial decisions. For example, about 5 to 10% of the time that I eat ice cream, it triggers horrible pains in my stomach and back. However, the rest of the time I enjoy the experience. Thus, the expected utility is that 90 to 95% of the time I'm coming out on top. Despite expected utility being a very logical way to view the world, humans are rarely exclusively logical. Even us systematic, very structured, neurodivergent folks, we rely on feelings and hidden thoughts and reasons to make decisions. When something is not expected, but instead it is particular to a person's internal decision making process, we may refer to that as subjective utility. Subjective utility is what it means to that person who's making the decision. Again, the common example comes in the form of gambling. Purchasing lottery tickets is almost guaranteed to lead to a net loss. But many people know that and they purchase them anyways. They're not purchasing them because of the expected utility, which is a net loss, but because it gives them the opportunity to fantasize about what they'd do with the winnings. Would they buy a new car, buy a house, or maybe they'd pay off family housing, maybe they'd donate it? The reality is they're probably never going to win the lottery, but the fantasy is worth that couple of dollars that they do spend. Similarly, at a casino, a person probably knows they're going to come out on the bottom financially, but they might be looking forward to the mindless pulling of a slot machine or the thrill of playing a good hand in poker. Subjective utility doesn't necessarily make sense when trying to make wise and informed decisions. But like so many things in any organism's behavior, logic may only be one of the factors. Coming back around to us neurodivergent people, we're often criticized for our odd behaviors and doing things in strange or rigid ways. At best, we're asked why we do things in that way. And at worst, the tendency is assigned an assumed purpose. One thing I often read is that our rigidity and our patterns bring us comfort, but I don't think that the story stops there. I suspect that just as importantly, the behaviors that we exhibit prevent the anxiety that comes with doing things differently rather than giving us comfort directly. In either case, however, the subjective utility is born. For myself, taking a glass out of the cupboard allows me to pretend that it's in a more pristine and sterile state than the glasses on the drying rack that I've just washed and know have been used by someone before me. The expected value, though, might be considered that there are now additional dishes that have to be cleaned and put away later, rather than just using the ones that are already out. For someone with OCD or who struggles with forgetting and worrying, putting a curling iron in their purse and taking it to work guarantees that they didn't leave it plugged in at home. And it gives them an opportunity to check their purse, see the curling iron is there, and reduce their anxiety. But in contrast, the expected value is that it's just another thing taking up space in a place it doesn't belong that we have to bring from place to place to place and work around constantly. Unfortunately, something I think that both neurotypicals and neurodivergents are guilty of in varying capacities and in different presentations are failing to consider the subjective utility for others. We see in outdated therapy techniques attempts to stop or correct behaviors that carry no harm simply because they don't conform to societal expectations. A moment of asking and observing why we behave that way might demonstrate that the subjective utility is important to us and to our mental health. Maybe we need an alternative, healthier way, but maybe what we're doing is fine. And for us, neurodivergents, we might forget that the subjective utility of something like buying a lottery ticket may not be a logical decision. But on its own, buying a lottery ticket for an emotional purpose is not necessarily wrong. Whoever we are, and whatever conditions we have or don't have, it usually helps to take a moment and try to understand why a person is doing something and what it may mean to them, and contrast that to what it means to ourselves. In sharing these differences of utility between us and acknowledging the subjectivity of our individual experiences, we can develop a more coherent communication and understanding between us.